For those of you that maybe don't know, I love Doctor Who. It's one of my favourite shows of all time, and when I heard that Russell T Davies was coming back as showrunner after leaving the show in 2010, I was over the moon. His original run from 2005 to 2010 with Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant as the Doctor is my era of Doctor Who. That is the era I heavily grew up with, and it's the one that I come back to on a regular basis, and it's the one I have the most nostalgia for. So when I heard he was coming back, I was ecstatic. I was really excited to see what he would do, and seeing how well the 60th specials went, I was even more excited than I could have hoped for, because those ended up being great, and the fact that we had Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, who was an incredible actor, I was so ready for this new season. And now we are finally here. The rather annoyingly named Season 1 has just finished, and I didn't love it as much as I wanted it to. Don't get me wrong, this was still a really good season, and it's probably the best straight up season of Doctor Who we've had for quite a long time. But considering what I thought we were going to get and how good it could have been, it ended up being a rather mixed bag. There's a lot of good still in there, but there's also a lot of stuff that was rather messy. First off, the positives. Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor is easily the best thing in this whole series. He brings a lot of charisma and energy, but also a lot of depth to his portrayal of the Doctor. When he needs to be fun and energetic, he brings that, but then there are also quite a lot of moments where he has to really reel in those emotions and give some incredible powerhouse performances in very short spaces of time, and he does a very good job of knowing when to switch from one thing to the other. Plus he bounces off of Millie Gibson so incredibly well. She plays the new companion this series, Ruby Sunday, and I have my own issues with her character, which we'll get onto in a minute, but that's not necessarily down to Millie Gibson's performance, it's more down to the structure of the series and the writing, but again, I will get to that in a minute. But for what it is, Millie Gibson, she grew on me more over time. At first, I wasn't 100% convinced of her performance, but as the series went on, I really liked that dynamic that her and the Doctor shared, and it genuinely felt like two best mates going around travelling, and I really loved seeing that unfold throughout the series. Now, my next positive is a bit of a double-edged sword, because as brilliant as it is this series, it also kind of falls flat in a few areas, and that is the writing. The writing this series, for the most part, has been fantastic, but it's also been kind of crap in places as well. Case in point, this series has delivered some of the best standalone episodes the show has given us in years. Boom, 73 Yards, Rogue, Dot and Bubble, those episodes in particular are fantastic. The stories are solid, they are so well written. However, on the other hand, you get episodes like Space Babies, which was the opening episode of the season for some reason, and I genuinely don't know why, because it's one of the worst episodes of the show I've seen in quite a long time. And to open with that was honestly quite a baffling choice for my opinion, and to be honest, thinking of the series as a whole, I don't really know where Space Babies would have best fit if they would have moved it around. It's a weird one to start the series with, and to be honest, it's just a weird episode, full stop. I genuinely don't know where it would have best fit, and it kind of would have been better if it had just been removed entirely. Which actually nicely leads me on to my other main issue with Season 1 of Doctor Who, and that's the length. This series we only got 8 episodes, whereas usually in the past we get about 13. And the reason 13 episode series lengths work as well as they do, especially when it comes to Doctor Who, is because you can have the majority of the episodes focus on an overarching thing that then gets resolved in the finale. However, because you have 13 episodes to play with, that gives you enough room to maneuver and give you filler episodes that can help the pacing of the season so much. And because this series only has 8 episodes, it goes by incredibly quickly and you don't get those filler episodes. And some episodes that do appear in this season, like Space Babies, or even Rogue to an example, end up just feeling a little bit out of place. And that's coming from someone who really loved Rogue as an episode. It really would have worked better with a longer season length. And that reason is because if you have 13 episodes and you have those filler episodes, it gives you much more time to develop these characters and the relationship they have. You can spend some smaller, quieter moments or even whole episodes developing their relationship. You got that in series 5 with Amy and the Doctor and Rory. For example, Amy's Choice is a great standalone episode, can also be seen as filler as well, but it does a good job of developing that dynamic between the three of them. However, because this series only has 8 episodes, every episode feels just as important as the last one, because it's literally one after the other, and then before you know it, you're at the finale. And you never get that chance to fully believe or get used to their relationship. So when you get episodes where you're supposed to be convinced that they've been travelling for months, you don't get that. The best example of this is the first 2 episodes of the series. Space Babies takes place literally a few moments after the Christmas special, so timing wise that's perfect. They're still very early on into their relationship as the Doctor and companion, and this is literally one of their first adventures. However, in the very next episode, it is apparently referenced in a conversation that the last time they went back to 2024 was June, which insinuates they've been travelling for months and we've missed loads of adventures in the middle of that. And because this is literally the second episode in the series, and you're jumping from one of their literal first adventures to one of their later ones, I can't believe that mentally. If the Devil's Cord, for example, had been pushed back till later in the series in terms of the episode listing, then yeah, maybe I'd buy that a bit more. But because it is literally the second episode in the run of episodes, I find that very hard to believe. And we're supposed to kind of immediately click with their relationship and believe that they've been travelling for months, yet because we've not seen any evidence of that and are just supposed to take it as it is, it's very hard to find that connection. Again, Millie Gibson and Ncuti Gatwa do a brilliant job of trying their best to bring this relationship to the forefront, and also do a good job of showing that in many, many scenes. You really do get a genuine sense that they are friends, but in terms of that deeper connection that a companion and the Doctor have, there are a lot of moments where the show just refers to stuff and you're meant to just take it as face value and accept it. And unfortunately for a show like Doctor Who, I can't. Now, as good as the writing is in this season, there are also a number of things that bugged me quite a bit as well. The main one being, and this is something that Russell T Davies started doing with the 60th specials and then really started hammering in from the Christmas special onwards, is the fact that he keeps setting up so much bloody stuff. It was quite a lot to take on board with the Christmas special, but as soon as this season started, it really went overboard to the point where, like, I think it got to the point where like 7 or 8 separate things were all being set up for later payoffs, and it's actually kind of hard to keep track of those things. And again, in previous seasons of the show, they would only set up like maybe 1 or 2 things per series that would then get a payoff in the finale, or maybe even a season later. But again, that's just like 1 or 2 things that you can keep track of in the background whilst you're focusing on the main stories at hand. This series of Doctor Who sets up so many different things. You've got Mrs. Flood, who was introduced in the Christmas special, who breaks the 4th wall for some reason, and we still don't know who she is or why she's here. You've got a woman who keeps popping up in different locations, the TARDIS lands. You've got different villains throughout the series referring to the one who waits, and then you've got other villains referring to somebody else who they just call the boss. And on top of all of that, you've got the stuff with Ruby and the mystery surrounding her mum that was all set up in the Christmas special. And that's barely scratching the surface. There's like loads of other stuff that Russell T Davies sets up in this series, some of which does get explained in the season finale, but a lot of which still has yet to be explained and probably won't be explained for another season or 2. Now don't get me wrong, I like intrigue. I like things that get set up in breadcrumb style ways that then gets paid off later down the line. However, this kind of takes the piss a little bit, and it did get to a point where the later on we got into the season, more things were being set up and I was just getting a bit fed up. I just wanted a nice standalone episode that was just good for what it is. And even when we do get them in this series, there's always an element in the background that sets something else up later down the line. For example, the two best episodes for this are Boom and 73 Yards. Two of my favourite episodes of the season that just work really well as these tightly written, well executed, simple concepts that really push those concepts to the limit. However, the show still finds ways to introduce things that were either set up earlier or things that will then be set up here to then be paid off later in those episodes. And in the grand scheme of things, those episodes don't really need that. They are brilliantly executed, tightly knit stories that are just on their own. Similar to Blink or Midnight from the original Russell T Davies era. Solid standalone episodes that are just well executed as a whole and are showing the potential of Doctor Who and just sci-fi writing in general. However, going back to the positives very quickly, I liked how this series actually kind of had something to say. Almost every episode had a point to it and a theme that was very clear and evident by the end of it. For instance, the best example of this is Dot and Bubble, an episode that I think a lot of people initially wrote off when it was first announced. I know I did. I saw the teaser image and was like, this is going to be just a filler episode that I'm not really going to think much of. And then the episode came out and it was really good. Specifically in the way it ended as well. The ending alone flips the entire context of the story you've just watched unfold in the best possible way. And when an episode of a show or a film can do that, especially when it's Doctor Who, it is brilliant. Just from one simple thing in the ending scene flips the entire context, and I love the way they execute it, specifically in Dot and Bubble. Now, of course, there is obviously the season finale, which I won't go into too much detail with, as I'm aware there are probably people watching this video that haven't even seen this series yet. All I will say is that the setup for the finale was a lot more satisfying and intriguing than the payoff ended up being. And that's not to say that the payoff was bad by any means, it's more just the fact that it felt rushed in the context of that story in the finale. For example, the first part of the season finale, The Legend of Ruby Sunday, I thought was fantastic. I thought everything it was setting up and the way it was setting it up was riveting. The way it kept raising the stakes up to a fantastic cliffhanger. Brilliant episode. And then you get to Empire of Death, which for me, I loved the first half of it. The Doctor is just so distraught and literally doesn't know what to do. And that desperation and that sadness comes through in some genuinely brilliant scenes that are so beautifully performed by Ncuti Gatwa. It's everything in the second half of the episode that kind of falls flat for me, because you've got so many things that have been set up, not just in the first part, but in the whole of the series, and the payoff to those things just feels like it's trying to get them done as quickly as possible. Personally, I just really hope that season 2 onwards learns from the mistakes that season 1 had. The fact that there weren't that many episodes, and the fact that you don't have to keep setting up God knows how much stuff in a short space of time. However, considering how good this series has been, I genuinely cannot wait for what Russell T Davies and the rest of the crew have to offer in the future. If you've seen the newest series of Doctor Who, let me know in the comments what you thought about it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.